Welcome dear friends to the NPTEL module on strategic trade and protectionism theories and empirics. We are now at the 24th lecture on the understanding of measurement of terms of trade. Though we have already started this topic in this particular week, where we have been emphasizing various concepts of terms of trade and its connection with developmental indicators. So, therefore, in order to go into the depth of terms of trade and its understanding to the international trade strategies, we are supposed to also imbibe ourselves with the detailed measurement of terms of trade. So, therefore, the title of this 24th lecture is specified with measurement related issues. So, title of the presentation is, title of the topic of today's lecture is measurement of terms of trade. Myself Dr. Pratap Mohanty, faculty member, Department of Humanities and Social Science. So, we have already discussed this part, what is called terms of trade. As we understand the terms of trade is nothing but an index, a ratio of index of export prices to import prices, and largely understood in terms of its payment towards export prices to import prices of the commodities. Now, why we are again confused? Because of whether it is the volume of trade and its export prices or import prices really matter, or the price or the factors those are involved within the trade transaction are important, or we may also think of the welfare changes or the quality of the product. There are various ways of understanding terms of trade. So, therefore, this lecture is on clarifying this, starting with the meaning of terms of trade. Again, the simple calculation of TOT, the terms of trade, is on index of export prices to index of import price. So, index is very important because a country usually is attached with various products X1, X2, X1, X2, X3, X4 till n number of products, those are exported. Similarly, M1, M2, M3, Mn products are attached. So, therefore, an index of their prices or the average prices with weighted average or not, we will think about in our measurement issues. So, those are very important to calculate the terms of trade. So, what are the different concepts of terms of trade then? Initially, Gerald Mayer has classified different concept of terms of trade as per the following categories. They defined, especially Mayer, and we also attach another person's contributions to this field. Now, initially they talk about ratio of exchange between commodities. So, broadly the measurements are actually defined into three categories. First of all, as I just mentioned, the first category is purely based on the commodity exchange, and commodity exchange are again of three types: net barter, gross barter, and income terms of trade, where somewhere we are attaching to the commodities and exchange to define the terms of trade. Second set of argument in measuring terms of trade as suggested by Mayer is due to the interchange between productive resources, and basically that the second set of instruments which are developed by Mayer is on interchange between productive resources. So, what do you mean by then productive resources is related to whether the factors those are involved are productive or they are not productive. Now, whether one factor that is productive or both are productive. Now, in this context probably it is good to emphasize productive factors by relating to there are many calculations made by total factor productivity by many experts in the world. So, TFP, total factor productivity, is one of the most important indicators of measurement of productive resources. Third set of argument or the categories defined to measure terms of trade is through the gains from trade in terms of utility. The focus here is utility derived from the trade, from export or import. The second one was on productive resources. First one is in simply commodity of exchange of commodities. Now, what I infer out of it on the last component, the third component, again it is of two types, real cost terms of trade and utility terms of trade. Now, what is the real cost of exchanging the goods and commodities must be understood in the trade context. Now, let us talk about one by one. So, Jacob, Wiener and Mayer actually structured into this is as follows, and they structured into those categories further. Jacob, Wiener and Mayer, Gerald Mayer, as I mentioned in the previous slide, where first category is on net barter or commodity terms of trade, and the second category is of gross barter terms of trade, and the third one is on income terms of trade. Fourth one, I mean again these are of all these three category. First category is single factorial, then double factorial, factorial terms of trade. Sixth, this is of second category which we discussed. Third one is of real cost terms of trade and utility terms of trade. This is based on gains. This is based on productivity. This is based on commodity exchange of commodities. Now, the types of trade is actually conceptualized accordingly. Let us understand and unfold the discussion to categorically emphasize each of the instrument just mentioned. First one, as I just said, not net barter terms or commodity terms of trade, is nothing but the index of export prices to index of import prices. Now, commodity terms of trade in different time period can be also measured by following formula. I mean, as if you simply refer to a specific time t, then this is fine. But now, if you have different time period to compare our terms of trade, then I mean 100 is assumed everywhere 100 is assumed, here also we can assume with multiplying by 100. So, if you have different time period, then how should we go for it? If it is a different time period, then certainly the base period must have been emphasized. Base year, what is the base year, what is the comparison of base year must have been emphasized. Now, here we are referring price of export of of current year and price of imports of the current year. 1 stands for the current year, whereas 0 stands for the base year. Base year is mentioned. Now, it's all about Px by Pm in period 1 divided by Px by Pm in period 0 or base year into 100. So, for comparison purpose, we are supposed to take the ratio prices, the terms of trade, TOT of period 1, TOT of period 0. So, it is basically comparing the time period, the rate of change of terms of trade between two time periods. So, that is another way, or here if we just multiply 100 here, then 100 here, 100 cancel actually. So, this simply ratio will give you the result, right result so far as different time periods and commodity terms of trades are concerned. And here net is considered because we are considering the net in terms of the prices. Now, what about gross then? We will actually talk about in the next slide. Now, let us understand what is the problem with the net barter terms of trade. Now, as pointed out by experts that the principle of commodity terms of trade has been criticized due to many grounds, some of the important grounds. Now, the first ground is due to the fact that the changes in the composition of foreign trade and the quality of the goods has not been they have not been considered. Terms of trade is only based on export and import prices, whereas the composition of trade basket and the quality of their goods have not been considered truly. And the second aspect, second criticism of the net barter terms of trade is due to the time factor, and this concept only examines short term changes, whereas it does not talk about the long term changes. So, two time periods, suppose we are only concerned with period 1 divided by period 2 or period 0. If these are of time distance is not far away or not far, then the change is the delta of TOT is actually captured properly. If the base period is far away or far from the year of current year, then the change, this way of change or identify the change is actually not correct, because we are the in between, if the years of change is too large, then the impact in the trade basket would have been very different, and this method is not capturing this correctly. So, that is one of the pitfalls of net barter terms of trade. Now, let us examine another aspect of gross barter terms of trade. So far as gross commodity terms of trades are concerned, since initially we say price of export import, but in case of commodity or gross barter terms of trade, not the relative or the net is usually expressed in terms of relative changes, that is reflected with price of x by price of y. But now due to the approach of understanding terms of trade through quantity production or quantity traded, we feel that just the ratio of is clarifying the concept. Quantity import divided by quantity exported times 100. So, TQ stands for gross barter terms of trade, and QM stands for quantity of imports, and QX stands for quantity of exports. Now, similarly, if there are different time period to compare the gross barter terms of trade, why we are saying barter terms of trade? Because goods are exchanged with goods. Goods are exchanged with goods, there is no other intermediaries, no other intermediaries. Or alternatively, you can say that there is no deferred payment, or another interpretation is like there is no other forms of return, no other forms of return, or no further terms of exchange. So, therefore, we interpret it as barter terms of trade, exchange with one exchange is reciprocated with another exchange of goods. Now, here as per the time differences, similarly 1 stands for the current year, 0 stands for base year. Now, this is basically QM by QX of period 1 divided by QM by QX in period 0, and 100 in both the side cancelled. So, the net result is only the ratio of these two. Now, is it a better method? So, let us understand. So, as may pointed out Tassig, that gross commodity terms of trade include unilateral transactions like donations, gifts, etc. In balance of payment. It is actually not a natural flow of goods in the trade basket. So, therefore, it is not representing the natural flow of goods. Now, only we consider total quantity imported and total quantity exported. So, in either in different time periods. So, now here we are separating the unilateral transfers. So, what do you mean by unilateral transfers? If the country only gives in terms of only donate, or it only gives one direction transfer in terms of donation, in terms of gifts. So, now in the trade basket QM, if it is the fact, QM must far exceed QX, which is actually not right, or not rightly representing the terms of trade through the measurement of quantity terms of trade. Now, similarly, this does not provide any clue of payment of capital and its effect. Only we are confining ourselves to the discussion of exchange of quantities or commodities, whereas the quid pro quo payments are not discussed, payment of capital and its further effects are not discussed. Even the same was discussed in the net barter terms of trade, where the unilateral transfer or the other forms of transactions are not discussed, like I mean it is purely based on barter terms of trade. So, only other linkages to the transaction are not discussed in this method. Like net commodity terms of trade, as we mentioned before, this method also does not attach any importance to the change in the quality of the goods. So far, the quality of goods which are being traded are not discussed correctly. Which quality are actually imported or exported, whether after trade the quality of the product is good or bad is nowhere discussed, and how it impacts terms of trade is not emphasized. Therefore, certain new methods are important for us for discussion. Now, another approach of measuring terms of trade is through income terms of trade. How much income earned by earned as a ratio through export or through import. So far we discussed QX in the previous slide. So, TQ we discussed. Now, we are discussing a little bit different, that is in terms of income. Income terms of trade is the ratio of index of exports, price of exports, and the index of price of imports multiplied with another component called quantity. Now, it is actually equal to TC times the terms at which trade takes place. Terms at which trade takes place, this is nothing but the but the net barter terms of trade. I think we already used the notation in the earlier measurement or net barter terms of trade times the quantity, basically the rate at which we exchange our goods times the extent of quantity we are exporting. Okay. So, that defines the I mean times the quantity, I mean this defines the income, the total earning of the country of its exports. So, basically it is of Px by Pm into Qx. So far as the income terms of trade is concerned, quantity of exports are multiplied to derive the income earned through our exports. So, net prices, net terms times our exports is more important. So, net, if it is relatively higher, if Px is relatively by fraction higher than that of Pm, then the out of the total quantity exported, our value is positive, our value is greater than 1, and it is favorable. Where if it is less than 1, still not negative, so it will be in fraction. So, I mean it will be unfavorable to the trade. So, income terms of trade are also called capacity to import. What is the value we are earning after multiplying quantity and with that value do you have the capacity to import. If our value is actually less, so therefore, our import basket will be also less. So, so it is therefore defined as a long term, long run approach, since the total value of exports of a country is equal to the value of total imports. Because whatever the total value, we are multiplying the value of exports of a country by multiplying this with the relative prices. So, this is nothing but going to be realized in terms of imports further in the long term. So, whatever the earning we have, so isn't it the earning can be actually used for imports. So, therefore, income terms of trade is a long term phenomena, one of the very important attributes we attached due to these reasons. So, whatever we earn through relative prices of export to import through exports, we can materialize to imports in the long run. So, since these two value are equal in the long run, I hope it is quite understood to the context of measurement. Now, it is also not free from many criticisms. Some of are very important. So, the main criticism of the terms of income terms of trade are like it does not throw any light on the profit or losses of international trade, though we are saying we have earning, but those earnings are actually again used for imports. So, the terms of trade is not attach any information on profits or losses. So, the balance of payment aspect of whether it is favorable balance of payment or surplus balance of payment or not is not actually addressed. That is one of the important criticism. So, similarly, it is defined as a very narrower concept, as very narrower definition, because of the fact that because of the fact that it relates to the capacity of imports as being dependent only on exports. There is no other approaches by which exports are derived, only or imports are derived or imports are made. So, as if country is not having any problem or deficits because of the fact that it imports what it exports. So, it is very narrowly defined. So, similarly, there are other approaches which discusses the terms of trade, like so far we discuss short run, then we discussed long run to some extent. We also discussed the absolute one, the relative one. Now, there are many questions related to productivity, productivity constraint, productivity constraint or utility constraints while measuring the terms of trade. So, one way of understanding the productivity is through single factorial terms of trade. So, this depends on factorial terms on the productive efficiency of the factors of production. So, productive efficiency of the concerned factor which are utilized is also quite important to look at. So, single factorial terms of trade where we are referring to a single factorial terms of trade, the commodity terms of trade are multiplied by the index of export productivity. The commodity terms of trade times the index of factor productivity are actually multiplied. Index of export productivity, whatever the export we made or we are going to make, does it have productivity coefficient? If that is multiplied, then the net, basically the net, these are multiplied by the net commodity terms of trade are multiplied with the export productivity. Now, this is nothing but this multiplied this. So, out of our net barter terms of trade, how much of it is actually connected to the factor productivity. Now, factor productivity it is very difficult to measure. So, therefore, there are number of critics on it. According to the critics, the greatest shortcomings of this single factorial terms of trade is that it does not take into consideration potential domestic cost of production of input industries of importing country. So, it only talks about the export segment, the productivity. What about the import? What are the potential domestic cost of production of the import? Because just importing a product and the industry is attached to importing the product, it also attaches number of cost and its efficiencies. So, therefore, the import segment is missing and is one of the criticism. So, somewhere there are many instruments by which you can measure the productivity of a single factor. So, those instruments are not being discussed in the lecture, those are a part of other discipline, other particular specialized papers. So, here we are only concerned with what is important in single factorial terms of trade. So far as since it was criticized in the single, now in the double factorial terms of trade. So, most importantly we are taking this times as a ratio, it is not just export, we are also considering the import part. So, what is this broadly? It is this component T C, this is actually T C, T C times a ratio of the factors of the factors of import as well as factors of exports. So, double factorial terms of trade takes into account the productivity of factors of production in the country exports as well as the productivity of the foreign factors of production used in the country's imports. So, foreign factors used in the imports and our factors and the domestic factor used in our export basket as a ratio that determines the two or double factorial terms of trade. Now, the criticisms are the following. It has some criticism. The main criticism is very difficult actually to estimate the index of double factorial terms of trade of a country, because of the fact that because the major productivity of import, basically because to do so it is necessary to measure the productivity of import goods produced in the country. It is necessary to measure the productivity of input goods produced in the country. So, which is quite actually difficult to do. So, it is also not possible to measure the gains of international trade by this concept. So, gains from trade from this concept we are only concerned with the productivity differences which are responsible for trade, and the gains are not defined in this methodology, and because no importance given to the utility of the goods exported imported, how much utility is actually derived from the import or the exports. So, these are not discussed correctly. Now, similarly therefore, their new concepts are defined. So, one criticism of this double factorial is though it is including the productivity of the import basket and how it is adding productivity, how the foreign factors are productive enough is very difficult to calculate. Okay. So, that is one of the aspect. Now, we are jumping into the methodology which are confined to the utility of the terms of trade, utility of our basket of terms of trade, utility based on utility pattern or the welfare out of it. So, what are the real cost of terms of trade? So, therefore, the real cost as a term is defined. So, import and export goods are compared according to their utility as I just mentioned. So, real cost and the real cost of export as well as imports are worked out. So, real cost of term is calculated by multiplying the single single factorial terms of trade with the index of the amount of DC utility per unit of product resources those have been forgone or resources those have been used for exporting. For example, TS is used here, TS times Rx. So, Rx stands for the sacrifice of utility inherent in the exports. We are exporting for sure. Whenever we export, we actually forgo our utility. utility, we actually forgo our utility. So, how much utility has been forgone in order to get the productivity of the factor for exports. So, therefore, it is the single factorial terms of trade times the utility forgone. Now, if we multiply it, we find the total utility forgone for the purpose of that. So, this actually measures the exact opportunity cost, opportunity cost of production for exporting a product. So, this measures our utility which has been forgone, but actually that therefore, this is the exact valuation of our product. So, the criticism is very difficult to measure. So, one main defect is it is concerned with only the quantity of foreign goods obtained with the real cost of product which are exported. So, what about the import, those are imported, and what kind of utility we have added due to foreign goods which are imported, these are not discussed. So, therefore, the utility terms of trade is actually defined where we are including the complete utility times this TR is now considered TR this, which is nothing but till this times the utility. So, what do you mean by utility here? So, utility is utility forgone to exports, and the total utility. Now, utility terms of trade is the index of relative utility. So, basically this is not just utility, this is relative utility per se is relative utility, import as well as export product. Import and domestic commodities forgone to export the product. So, it is not just exportable products, the importable product as well. So, I mean one of the criticism which is very important to discuss is called is due to the fact that it is very unrealistic, very difficult to measure. A utility and disutility concept can be measured precisely. Both concepts are subjective, very subjective, this concept has no practical significance. So, now there are other aspects. So far we discussed different measurement of trade. Now, I think we have already consumed the time for covering this. We will probably extend the determinants of measurement, what affects terms of trade in the next class in detail. Next class we will talk about what really affects and how and what are the impacts of terms of trade. So, we will unfold the determinants in the next class systematically. With this, I think I should stop here. Thank you.